So now Krishna is going to speak um, or Narayan is going to speak to Shukracharya, who is again he's Bali's guru, the guru of the demons, who had previously just instructed. Um, um, he had previously just instructed Bali, do not, um, do not offer anything to uh, this little brahmachari boy who is Lord, because he is Lord Vishnu, right? And if you offer to him, he'll take everything away, So he's instructing him, don't serve Lord Vishnu. And but Bali disregarded that instruction. And after Shukracharya gave his advice to Bali, and Bali refused that advice, rejected the instruction and advice of his guru, then Shukracharya cursed Bali Maharaj. And he cursed him, saying that very soon all your opulences will be taken from you. Right? And we see that his curse came true. I mean, when one of these powerful, you know, um, powerful yogis, when they curse, the curse is effective. And so almost immediately, Bali Maharaj was, bereft of all of his opulence, in one sense at least. But now Vishnu is going to speak to him, and he says, Hari, the Supreme Personality of God Narayan, thereafter addressed Shukracharya, who was sitting nearby, and he's sitting with the priests that were performing the yajna, and the four different priests are mentioned. And in the Vedas, these four different varieties of priests are spoken of, and each one has a different responsibility. Each one has his own assistants, and together they all put on the yajna. Um, and so then text 14. O best of Brahmanas, Shukracharya, please describe the fault or discrepancy in your disciple Bali Maharaj, who engaged in performing sacrifices. This fault will be nullified when judged in the presence of qualified Brahmanas. So here's Srila Prabhupada's commentary. When Bali Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj had departed for the planet Sutala, Lord Vishnu asked Shukracharya what the fault was in Bali Maharaj, for which Shukracharya had cursed him. Right? You cursed him? What for? It might be argued that since Bali Maharaj had now left the scene, how could his faults be judged? In reply to this, Lord Vishnu informed Shukracharya that there was no need for Bali Maharaj's presence, for his faults and discrepancies could be nullified if judged before the Brahmanas. As will be seen in the next verse. In other words, I assume what that means is that if Bali Maharaj was at fault, these priests could do sacrifice on his behalf to free him from whatever bad karma he was meant to receive. So what did he do wrong? Now, in reply to this, Lord Vishnu informed Shukracharya that there was no need for Bali Maharaj's presence, for his faults and discrepancies could be nullified if judged before the Brahmanas. As will be seen in the next verse, Bali Maharaj had no faults. Shukracharya had unnecessarily cursed him. Nonetheless, this was better for Bali Maharaj. Being cursed by Shukracharya, Bali Maharaj was deprived of all his possessions, with the result that the Supreme Personality of Godhead favored him for his strong faith and devotional service. Of course, a devotee is not required to engage in fruitive activities, and this becomes real important now. Of course, a devotee is not required to engage in fruitive activities. As stated in the Shastra, Sarvahanam Achuteja. This is from 4th Canto, 31st chapter, 14th verse. By worshipping Achyuta, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one satisfies everyone. Because Bali Maharaj had satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there was no discrepancies in his performance of sacrifice. Right? So Bali was performing a sacrifice. Generally, these sacrifices, commonly, as they're laid out in the Vedic literature, these sacrifices are done for material gain. It's a common theme throughout the Vedas, that in the pursuit of living a pious, good life and making a gradual progression towards spiritual life, that one would perform sacrifices for material benefits according to the teachings of the Vedas. One would assemble the necessary priests to do it, um, and 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 uh, and those priests would have to, there are four priests there. Each has a different responsibility. And when you're in the realm of not, this isn't the realm of bhakti. This is in the realm of karma kanda, where one's trying to find material gain through these sacrifices. It has to be done with precision, right? Because any mistake, any discrepancy, any fault, it doesn't work. If the mantras are, for instance, if the mantras are chanted incorrectly, right? If they're mispronounced, not only do you not get the result that you're aiming for, you might even get the opposite result. And we see that happen in Bhagavatam. Um, so apparently, Shukracharya saw a discrepancy in the sacrifice by Bali Maharaj. Right? Materially, Bali Maharaj, if you look at, I mean, it's kind of like, it's a story where it's like, you know, and even Lord Brahma will come and pray, come on, let's give Bali Maharaj a break. He saw, he was performing a sacrifice. Lord Vishnu came kind of in a disguise as a brahmachari boy, a dwarf, right? And he sees him, recognizes him as a brahmachari, as a brahmana, um, and so therefore, according to the teachings of the Vedas, he respects him and honors him properly. He's trying to do everything right. My dear brahmana, please ask for me whatever you like, and I'd like to give it to you. So he made his promise that whatever you wish, I'm happy to give to you. He made a promise. You have to keep that promise. He says, I only want 3 steps of land. Well, why would you ask for so little? I could give you so much, but if that's what you want, I'm happy to give it. Take your 3 steps. And this is where now Shukracharya is saying, don't make this offer to him. You don't know what you're getting into. Well, whatever I'm getting into, this is dharma, right? Whatever I'm getting into, if it's the right thing to do, I'm going to do the right thing. You're telling me that it's going to bring a bad, that he's going to take from me more than I should be giving. Well, the fact is, when I see a brahmana, they must be honored. It's the right thing to do. You're telling me it's going to lead to bad result, but dharma always leads to the good result. So I'm going to do the right thing. And he makes his promise. Okay, take your 3 steps of land. Shukracharya becomes upset. How could you ignore my advice? Who's the disciple and who's the guru here? What is this? I curse you. I curse you that very soon you'll become bereft of all your opulences. Right? And so Vamanadev takes 1 step, and by his 2nd step, he's already like broken out of the universe. He's broken out of the realm of what Bali Maharaj can offer him. And so really there's no place to put the 3rd step. He's although symbolically as a offer of surrender, he'll offer his head as the place for the 3rd step, but really there was nothing left to offer, because even that was within the realm of the universe. And so he becomes punished. He becomes arrested. He didn't fulfill his promise. He disobeyed his guru, right? And even eventually what happens is that his own armies go and they attack Lord Vishnu, and they're all held back. But in one sense, this sacrifice, this attempt, sincere attempt to do things right, had all backfired. And the result was that although it was a sacrifice done for material good, it ended out. We have an echo. Perhaps someone needs to mute their microphone. But it ended out backfiring, and everything apparently went wrong. Materially went wrong, right? He lost all that he had. He was arrested and humiliated. But there's a much, much deeper message there. And this comes out. Ultimately, we see what happened. Because he surrendered to God, even though materially it didn't make sense, but because there was a spiritual principle that he was clinging to, right? I mean, if we want to draw one important message out of this pastime, I, what I reach towards is Bali Maharaj was a person that was materially extremely qualified. I mean, he was ruling the universe, right? His power and his opulence, we can't imagine. Materially, he was very, very successful. But we see even he on the material level failed. But on the spiritual level, there was a principle that he was hanging on to. And that is that if you serve Lord Vishnu, and if that's your pure intention, that pure intention makes up for all material disqualification. Right? It saved him. So even though he was arrested and even though he was humiliated, ultimately he was glorified, right? Even though materially it seemed like everything was dark, on the spiritual level, ultimately it all paid off. Ultimately, he pleased the Lord, and the Lord was pleased with him, and he became glorified through it. That's the one principle. So Srila Prabhupada, in referring to that principle, he quotes a famous verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 4:31-14, and I'll read you that verse now. As pouring water on the root of a tree, and this metaphor of pouring water on the root of a tree is something that Srila Prabhupada will many times uh, um, use. It's a metaphor that is so relevant in our lives that it's something that we can all take to heart and really remember and kind of even center our life around this metaphor. As pouring water on the root of a tree energizes the trunk, branches, twigs, and everything else, and as supplying food to the stomach enlivens the senses and the limbs of the body, simply by worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead through devotional service, automatically satisfies the demigods who are parts of that Supreme Personality. All right, they're parts of that Supreme Personality. And in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is going to allude to the beginning of the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which describes that the world that we live in, or say the universe that we live in, can be seen as an upside down banyan tree with the roots going up and the branches going down. And that metaphor, it's to help us understand that the banyan tree is like a tree that's it's very vast. It's got branches going out in all directions, and then those branches, they go down back into the ground. And so a large banyan tree it almost looks like many trees, and it's very entangling, right? And the idea is that there's fruits on that tree, and we're trying to enjoy through Vedic sacrifice. People are trying to enjoy the fruits of the tree. In other words, we move through this world trying to enjoy the fruits of the material world, and Vedic sacrifice would be the recommended way to do that. But the Bhagavad Gita is meant to take one beyond the materialistic teachings of the Vedas. Krishna will call them to Arjuna the flowery words of the Vedas, that he should transcend them. So he describes that one needs to, that tree of material enjoyment that we are entangled in, Krishna says in the 15th chapter that one has to cut it down, right? With the axe, with the weapon of detachment. Right? We have to practice letting go of the things of this world. And he says you have to cut down that tree, and then one has to surrender to the Adi Purusha. We have Adi Purusha Prabhu here. And so he says the Adya Purusha, yes, the original person who is the source of everything, right? The root of everything is that original person. So the formula given there, again, is that with detachment, we let go of the things of this world and we surrender to the root of all existence. Now, when you surrender to the root, when you connect with the root, you satisfy everything that's connected to the root. So in this metaphor, the idea is the devas, the demigods, who we are all indebted to. Just like if you have an apartment in New York City, there's someone is supplying the electricity. You have to pay for that, right? Someone is supplying the water. You have to pay for that, It's someone who's supplying the heat that needs to be paid for, right? There are different departments, and you have to show the respect and the gratitude that each department head deserves because they supplied for you. Similarly, in this world, for us not to recognize and feel gratitude towards the devas is practically a crime. It makes us more or less a thief. But here it's being said, and so therefore people will perform sacrifices to the devas so that they'll get these supplies. Um, but if you go to the root, right, it's ultimately Krishna that's behind it all. And if one surrenders to him, simply him, and none other than him, then one satisfies them all. Right? Now, when this topic, it's a theme that's sown throughout the Bhagavatam. We see, even when you go to the beginning, at the very beginning of the Bhagavatam, the sages are gathered in Naimisharanya. And they all are trying sincerely to do what's best for the people of the Kali Yuga. They know the Kali Yuga is coming on. And they're doing different kinds of sacrifice, right? It's saying even that, like, they were burning fires and they're just getting covered. They could feel that the sacrifice really wasn't hitting the spot. They really weren't getting anywhere with it. They were just becoming covered by the smoke from the sacrificial fire. And so they turned to Sutta Goswami and they said, "Dear Sutta Goswami, among us all, you're the most learned. You truly understand the essence of all of Srila Vyasadeva's writings. And you've been blessed by your gurus because of your gentle and surrendered demeanor. You've been blessed to understand the deepest meaning of these great spiritual texts. So we're turning to you and we're asking you to tell us for sure, to boil it all down to its essence, to help us understand the essential message that's there, that's valuable for us, that will help us understand what is most valuable in life, and that will help people attain," and they use the phrase, Atma Suprasidhiti, complete satisfaction of the soul, right? Complete satisfaction of the self. How does one find that? Now, that's how they end the first chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam. In the second chapter of the first canto, Sutta Goswami responds. And he says, your questions about Atma Suprasidhiti, these are really good questions because it's only these kind of questions that lead to the complete satisfaction of the self, Atma Suprasidhiti. And then he describes how one achieves Atma. You want me to boil down all the Vedic teachings and tell you how one achieves complete satisfaction of the self? I'll tell you. Here it is. You ready? And he says a very famous verse, Savai Pungsa Paro Dharmo Yato Bhaktir Dhoksaje, Ahoitiki Apratiyata, Yayatma Suprasidhiti. That the highest dharma, there's so many dharmas that will be mentioned there, and many of those dharmas involve respecting and worshiping the devas and so on. But the highest dharma, the paro dharma, savai pungso, for all humanity, savai pungsa paro dharma, the highest dharma, yato bhaktir dhoksaje, is bhakti yoga, is bhakti, is devotion, pure devotion that's offered to Adhoksaja, that's offered to the Supreme Lord. And to qualify that and describe precisely what that means, he says, ahoitiki apratiyata, it must be unmotivated. It must, there's no material motivation in it. Ahoitiki apratiyata, and it must be uninterrupted. It's the constant flow of the heart that I live for you. Not even that I'm going to do something for you. Certainly not I'm going to do something for you to get something from me. But it's that, no, it's uninterrupted. It's always there. This is who I am. I am centered around you. Like the leaf isn't connected to the tree sometimes, right? It's connected to the tree uninterruptedly. It thrives by serving the tree, and it is maintained by the tree. Ahoitiki apratiyata yayatma suprasidhiti. It's only this kind of bhakti. It's only this kind of devotion. It's only this kind of sacrifice, the sacrifice of oneself, one's complete self, to the root of all existence, that brings Atma Suprasidhiti, complete satisfaction of the self. Now, okay, that's interesting, right? Now, the sages must have been said, we asked a question, and our question was, what leads to Atma Suprasidhiti? What is the essence of all the Vedic teachings? And now he's telling us that it's this bhakti yoga. It's this devotional aspect of um, of the Vedic teachings. Interesting, they might say, but then they might come through, and they do come through with a question. And after that verse, which is text 6, their next question is this. They say, or I'm sorry, you don't actually see their question, but you can perceive their question. You can, through what the next statement is by Sutta Goswami. The next thing that, let's say this, they might have asked, hearing that statement, that unequivocal statement, they might have asked, but you just told us that the essence of all the Vedas is bhakti. But we see that, for instance, the Upanishads, they speak so much about detachment, right? Jnana and vairagya, knowledge and detachment. Are you telling us that those are not the most important things? And that just bhakti is really more important than Gyan and Vairagya, the knowledge and detachment. And so the next verse, text 7 says, by rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, by pure bhakti, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from this world. So yes, it is more, as a matter of fact, knowledge and detachment just come as byproducts if you dedicate yourself to connecting with the root. All the rest comes automatically. And someone say, okay, well, that's interesting. But also, you know, the Vedic literatures, they speak so much about karma kanda, about doing the right thing, about how living a dharmic life leads to all good. So you're telling us the highest good and Atma Supersiddhiti are found solely through bhakti? Well, what about karma kanda? What about the teachings of how to perform sacrifice to attain happiness in life? And so this is what he says in response to that question. Text 8. The occupational activities a person performs according to their own position are only so much useless labor. All the good karma that you can do, all the good sacrifices that you can do, they're only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. Right? If it's not bringing you towards bhakti, then it really has no value. And then he goes on. All occupational engagements, all the dharma of laid out in the Vedas, are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. They should never be performed for material gain. Furthermore, according to sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification. Life's desires should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's work. And then he defines that absolute truth. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramama, and Bhagavan. Okay, so this second chapter of the first canto, I mean, it's practically everything's laid out so clearly for us, right? All the mysteries. If you take the big, vast Vedic literature and you're trying to figure out really what is it all about, well, the most qualified speaker lays it out for all the most qualified sages right in that chapter, right? And essentially what you can say is that this Bhagavan that he mentions is the absolute truth. This Bhagavan is the root of all existence. And by nature, he's kind and mercifully inclined to his devotees. So where one may practice karma kanda, you need to do it perfectly. And even the result that you get, it still doesn't lead to Atma Supersiddhiti, right? But if your heart is devoted to God, if you sincerely, and this is the panacea. This is that special gift from the heart of Krishna that makes up for all our discrepancies. What to speak of someone like someone raised in the Vedic culture. We all come from backgrounds that are, we all come with a lot of material baggage in this world, and but none of that becomes a disqualification if simply our sincere desire is to serve and reconnect with that root of all existence. It makes up for everything. It even makes up for all the mistakes, right? So, Krishna will carry what we lack. He'll preserve what we have for his devotee. He never says that about the karmakandi. He doesn't say that about the jnani, but for the bhakta, right? He'll carry what they lack. He'll preserve what they have. He'll take a personal interest. He's not interested in all the discrepancies. He'll just take the devotion as a sincere offering. So Bali Maharaj, in one sense, he screwed everything up, right? He disobeyed his guru. He wasn't able to carry out his promise. Um, but we see that ultimately Lord Vishnu glorifies him. Prahlad glorifies him. Lord Brahma glorifies him. And he's ultimately glorified, right? And then just to make the point, right? Lord Vishnu turns to Shukracharya. Now Shukracharya is a manifestation of karma and jnana. This is like a powerful mystic yogi. He's not a pure devotee, but all that other Vedic teachings, he's like an embodiment of it. So much so that he can curse, and he's powerful from it all. Powerful from the renunciation, powerful from the karmic sacrifices that he's performed. It's built up in him. He's got power, right? But he doesn't have pure devotion. And because Bali, he just had that sincere devotion, it put him in a whole nother category. And he just witnessed that in his own disciple, right? He just witnessed, he's more advanced than me, right? Ultimately, I misinstructed him. So then, in the verse that we just read today, Lord Vishnu turns to Shukracharya and says, well, what did he do wrong? You tell me now, what did he do wrong? Right? What was his fault in his what was the fault in his sacrifice? And he could have, at this point, he's just got to admit that there was no fault. He could have said, oh, he didn't carry out his promise. Oh, it was faulty in this way or that. No, he says there was no fault in what he did. Right? This is our blessing in life, and this is what Srila Prabhupada so thoroughly clarified for us. So thoroughly clarified for us. Prabhupada, in a sense, did what Sutta Goswami did. He took the essence of the Vedic literatures, he boiled it down for his audience, and he made it very clear what our priorities should be. Right? We're not great, even on the Karma Kunda level. We have no ability to do it well. Right? And when it comes to jnana yoga or renunciation, renouncing the things of this world, we're super weak. Right? We don't have the ability to wander off into the forest and sleep in the caves and live under the trees and control our minds and free ourselves, by the power of our own depth of analysis to root out all the attachments in our mind. We're very weak, right? But that's okay, because Krishna is just saying, just reconnect with the root, right? He's throughout the Gita, he's saying, just reconnect with me, nityam, just like always be connected with me. And that alone waters the root. And Prabhupada made it super clear, our duty, our part to play is never to forget it, is to never become confused or let that clear message become muddled up. Let that clear message get diluted in some way. This is the essence of surrender, is that complete faith. The Lord is my protector, right? The Lord is my everything. If I simply stay connected to that root, even if materially it doesn't make sense, it's my best. It's in my best interest. That faith, that type of surrender makes all the difference. I remember once I was giving a talk and I was speaking about Bhakti and speaking about love being directed towards God. And someone in the audience said, well, like I have my dog. And I love my dog. Now, why is that wrong? Isn't that bhakti too? Isn't that love? And is there, why is that wrong? And I said, no, there's no harm. There's nothing wrong in loving your dog. Your dog is a soul, just like every other soul. But there's a difference. You know, what you're asking me is kind of like saying, I have this plant, but I just find one leaf and I water that leaf, right? By you loving your dog, you don't connect with every living being. But when you love God, that's very different, because God is the root of all existence. So when you love God, it's not like watering the one leaf, it's like watering the root. And so therefore, if you love just your dog, your love becomes very limited, and the results will be very limited. But if you learn to love God, if you, through hearing and chanting about the glories of Krishna, if you develop genuine affection in your heart for Krishna and just through that one focus, you actually learn to love every living being in the universe. And so if we all just chose our object of affection randomly, well, I'm going to love this person. I'm going to love my family member. I'm going to love the person from my community. I'm going to love the person from my nation. All we have is conflict. And that's the nature of the material world. The nature of the spiritual world is that by choosing the root of all existence, by everyone being focused on that root, not only do they feel the love and the reciprocation from that root of all existence, but they love everyone and everyone loves each other, and there is no conflict, and that's called Vaikuntha. So all of these Bhagavatam teachings are so special, and this one with Bali Maharaj is really fascinating. So many fantastic prayers. Such an example set by Bali Maharaj that he got it. He got it clearly. Even he was put to the test. His own guru is telling him, "Don't do it." He gets humiliated. He gets arrested. He seems to be doing the right thing, and it keeps backfiring on him, and he doesn't complain because he has that faith that by pleasing Lord Vishnu, I'm doing the right thing. We just need, we'll be tested too. That's the nature of life in this world. It will be tested. We will probably never be tested as severely as Bali. So our tests, when they come, we should see them as small and insignificant, and remain hanging, remain hanging on to Srila Prabhupada's instructions, and in this way remain connected to that root of all existence. I'll stop here and open it up, and Gorsharam Prabhu, maybe if you could take questions in whatever way you feel is best here, whether it's from the chat board or.
Hi, Krishna. Thank you so
Yes,
much,
Prabhu.
bro. I already see a question in the chat box.
Okay.
Andrea has asked if she would like to unmute and ask personally. That's also fine.
Hare Krishna, Kaustubha
All right,
Prabhu.
Krishnanjay.
Thank you so much for the class. My question, which you started actually answering at that last moment, is whenever we speak about detachment, I'm always wondering how we can practice detachment without becoming hard-hearted.
Yes.
And that's one of my main concerns.
That's a great question, and of course, Rupa Goswami will kind of, he'll point that out. It's that if we try to practice detachment separate from bhakti, it is not only possible; it's even likely that to some degree the heart begins to harden. Right. Whereas with bhakti, the idea, now this is the idea, and it's it's a really fascinating concept, that rather than focus on our material attachments and annihilating them, that's one strategy. The devotee says, I'm going to focus on my attachments, but I'm going to focus on attaching myself to Krishna. Right. Now, of course, that's going to play out through embracing everything that's there in the teachings of bhakti. And what we begin to realize as we practice bhakti is that this holy name is all powerful. That these texts like Gita and Bhagavatam are non-different from Krishna. They are all powerful. They are radiating the purest, most powerful spiritual energy. And the only problem here is that I'm not so receptive to it, that I allow my mind to become distracted by the things of this world. And because of that, all my mind has to do is become absorbed in this name. All my mind has to do is become absorbed in these pastimes. And if it can just be absorbed in it, it's going to transform. There'll be no hard-heartedness whatsoever. The heart will melt. Literally, that's what happens in the path of bhakti. They say it's like a ray of sunlight that softens the heart, so that it can um, experience these most sublime spiritual emotions. It's a path of softening the heart. So this is the key, really. This is what the great bhakti yogis are telling us, that it's not about directly cultivating detachment. It's actually by cultivating attachment. And through that attachment, one automatically, or even the term I'm looking for is as a byproduct, right? Indirectly, but very effectively, lets go of all the material attachments, right? We need to be able to. I was just talking about this on Wisdom of the Sages this morning, but once my guru was telling me, he asked me, how is your chanting? When you chant and you meditate on the holy name, like, how are you doing? And I said to him, honestly, when I sit to chant, my mind is totally distracted. I try, but if I'm going to be honest, I can't say my mind is deeply absorbed. And he said to me, like, what's the problem? Pick up a book, read a few verses, feel inspired and chant. In one sense, it's that simple. But it's a fact that we need to, our entertainment, our joy, our way of passing our time, if we just try, if we just say, let me spend a few minutes, like, say, it's quite common, I find, that devotees don't pick up the books and read them very much. We got this sitting on the shelf, but we get caught up in the day, and we get out of the habit, and we lose interest. But we just have to make a little commitment. Let me read this 15 minutes a day. And once you start reading 15 minutes a day, it's like, oh my God, I needed that. Oh, it's so pure. It's so satisfying to spend 15 minutes just absorbing my mind. And this is not so much, so I can do it without becoming distracted. But then that'll lead to, 30 minutes a day, because just that taste will come back, And so the point being is that then you start becoming attached, right? You start becoming attached to Krishna. And then naturally you let go. There's no hardening of the heart with that. I hope that's helpful, Andre. Haribol. Korsharam Prabhu, what should I do next?
If there are no other questions, I have one question.
Yes, Prabhu.
Like you were while speaking, you said how Bali Maharaj, in spite of being a demon, he actually satisfied Vishnu or Krishna. So that kind of put everything else, resolved everything else. But we also see he was like at least like coming from a certain background, like being a king of the demons and all those things. And in spite of that, he could please actually Krishna. So if I have to just think for myself, I feel like, okay, I have so many like misgivings. So how can I satisfy Krishna? What will help me satisfy Krishna in my current position?
It's not like we're not like Bali, where he steps in front of us exactly in the same way. Right? For Bali Maharaj, he just walked right up to him and said, this is what I would like. I would like 3 steps of land. But what we're always, this is there, and this is something, again, that in our particular lineage, in our particular sampradaya, is made very clear for us. Gopi Bharatur Kamalayor Dasa Anudasa. Right? So Krishna may not stand in front of us and say, give me this, but his devotee does. And so really, becoming the servant of Krishna means becoming the servant of the devotee of Krishna. And not only does it please him, but apparently it pleases him more. You know, and but and it's such a valuable concept. I feel it brings a clarity and a potency to the sampradaya because it makes it real. I could, I can ring a bell and offer a stick of incense. And if it's offered with pure devotion, it's as good as any offering because it's offered with love. But I could do it without any love. I can do it without any genuine sacrifice of my heart. Potentially, it could be done that way. But when you serve Krishna's devotees, it requires sacrifice of time, sacrifice of energy, sacrifice of ego. It's demanding like that, and I think therefore it's purifying. So this is our conception of serving, reconnecting with the root of serving Krishna. We serve the devotee of Krishna.